become better. And again, welcome to Dee's Place. Welcome to Dee's Place. Last year in 2014, we did a talk show with our young people, talking about the devastation, if you will, of suicide in the state of Idaho Falls, Idaho. According to statistics, and this statistics was taken back in October of 2013, suicide is the second leading cause of death in Idahoans aged 15 to 34, and for males aged 10 to 14. The purpose for doing this particular segment on suicide in the state of Idaho Falls, Idaho, as you well know that we are many of our videotape segments, if you will, these places taken out of the state of Idaho. But the purpose for doing this series is to help educate our viewers on perhaps the devastation of suicide, especially in particular within families or individual. And so today, when we did this segment, Miss Monica Bitrick, who is a counselor, joined us for this youth fireside chat, if you will, concerning the suicide tendencies. But definitely, if you have any questions concerning this particular segment on suicide, please feel free to Twitter me at Where Real Talk Happens, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have. This particular segment is rather lengthy. I'm just wanted to let you know in advance, but very important. Our young people have something to say, and I believe that you will appreciate this particular segment on suicide among our young people. So please join me at this time as we go into our interview. Monica Bitrick was born Carlson and raised in Idaho Falls, Idaho, on a large farm south of town. Monica enjoyed many years of country living and learned the value of hard work at an early age. Monica is currently married happily to James Bitrick and has 2 children, Kylie, Alyssa, and Elijah Jared. Her hobbies include music, reading, fitness, dancing, snowboarding, and golfing. So at this time, please join me as we talk to Miss Monica Bitrick about suicide in Idaho Falls, Idaho. Tell us something about yourself.
I am a Southeast Idaho native, so I was born and raised in Idaho Falls, Idaho. I grew up in Idaho Falls. After high school, I went to Boise State University, graduated from there. Go Broncos.
Yes, that's my favorite team.
And I relocated back here to Idaho Falls several years ago. I have a daughter, Kylie, who's with us today, and a son, Eli, and a wonderful husband, James Bitrick.
Wonderful. So you work for the Suicide Prevention Action Network of Idaho, correct?
That's correct. I volunteer. Okay. I serve on the board of directors as the treasurer.
Okay. And so how have you found that volunteer service?
I actually was contacted by the executive director, okay, and she had asked me if I would be willing to join their board of directors. I had a friend that had referred me over. He knew my experiences with suicide and being the survivor of suicide, and felt I would be a good fit and could have an impact with the organization.
Okay. So working as a volunteer for the suicide prevention, those were birthed from personal experience.
Yes, that's correct.
Do you mind sharing that with us, please?
I will share that with you. When I was 20 years old, okay, my brother Jared committed suicide. Okay. And that had such an impact on my life because we were so close. We were best friends and grew up together. So it definitely had an impact on me, and took a long time for me to recover. And so my passion is to share hope and my experience so that other families don't have to go through what our family went through.
So was your brother's suicide based upon family issues? I mean, did you live in a happy home?
We did. My father, my mother's always worked for the site and kind of had that, working mom career focus. My dad was in agriculture, and so there were a lot of, very long hours and, very, hard work that went into what he did. When my brother passed away, he actually was doing consulting, working outside of the state. So we had a fairly good relationship as a family, but then because you have two working parents and one's, far off and away sometimes, I think that was a challenge with our family.
I see. And because that brings a valid point, because those who perhaps are watching around the world, sometimes when we hear of suicide, we think there's a devastation in the home, or it's a single family situation. But in fact, your family were the typical hardworking, happy family. And so we definitely want people to know that suicide can hit anyone across the board.
And I think that, with Jared, a lot of what went into his suicide were the struggles that, teens typically have. Not just back then, but today as well, when you're dealing with, trying to figure out what life is about and, how to navigate your feelings. And there was some depression and also, some substance abuse issues. So.
Okay. So for those who are just joining in, we're talking to Ms. Monica today. She is a specialist in suicide prevention. And so this is the month of July, and we are celebrating Youth Month and Children Month. And so we celebrate all of our young people and our children around the world. And so this segment is practically, for parents, young people, and children alike to know that that you are not alone in the situation perhaps that you're going through. So growing up, let me ask you this question. Looking at today's society, and I think the young people can attest, with technology, cell phone. I have a cell phone, and so instead of trying to spend time reading the manual, I just take my cell phone and say, here, to the young people. And they set it up, they set the screen up, they do all of that stuff for me. So with the advancement of technology, do you think that has something to do with perhaps our young people and depression, if you will?
I do, just because there is a difference now from when, I was growing up or you were growing up, where, their lives are 24/7 now because they're connected to the internet. So I think, social media definitely plays a huge role where, it used to not have, such a big role. They're always connected, people are always interacting, and, there could be one post on Facebook that just could, ruin their evening or their week. And that's something that is out there for other people to see, and that I think that has more of an impact because their lives now are so much more public than our lives were, and it's something that they have to, navigate on how to deal with that on a daily basis.
All right. This may be a dumb question. How many young people here have Facebook page? Just raise your hand. Okay, that's the majority that's everyone in this room. I have one, and I'm sure the adults in this room have Facebook page also. So I agree with you that Facebook, life is more public now, and I believe, I'm not sure, but once you post something on Facebook, is it there, or can you
can delete it, but where everybody's so interconnected at all times, if one of these guys had something that was posted on their Facebook page and they didn't agree with it, or, they didn't like it, who's to say they could catch that right away? So it could be far spreading even before they had the opportunity to go and change something that they don't like.
Wow. So let me ask you this question. Looking at your childhood, growing up and during the time that you have, and of course we are still young, and so we're not old, but growing up during the time that you grew up, and looking at society now, what do you see different, or what are some of those things that perhaps that brings fear, perhaps, concerning what society was like then versus now?
You always hear growing up, things were so much different when we were kids. Every generation says that. to their children. And, I think, my generation is no different when it comes to the young people, and saying there are a lot of differences. Our society is so fast-paced now.
Right.
Everything is the instantaneous, right here, right now. News, sensationalizes and focuses on the negative. And that, I think that impacts our children and our youth so much, because instead of seeing, positive and encouraging stories, that make an impact, you see and hear about all the gun violence, about, shootings, about, murder, suicide, as opposed to, somebody's done this and this had a positive impact here. So I think that because our society has gone that direction, that makes things so much more challenging, for these guys. And I think it creates a society that unfortunately is more negative. And so I feel like these guys have more on their shoulders, to try to overcome than we ever could, because they have to try to be, the positive light. And they have to try to figure out, how to navigate through all the negativity, based on their faith or their beliefs, or, their hope and encouragement family. So.
And so, speaking of suicide for the present moment, how many young people have experienced suicide or know of someone who attempted or committed suicide? Would you like to share your experience?
I actually had two experiences. That's okay.
Okay.
When I was younger, I didn't really struggle with depression very much, but I just wasn't comfortable where I was, because I was adopted, and I didn't want to be where I was, and at the time I believed in reincarnation and stuff. So I did have thoughts of doing that, like, and been seconds away from trying it, because I didn't want to be where I was at the time. And also just a year or two ago, one of my good friends, while I was living here, he was in California, he actually committed suicide, and he seemed to be the happiest person of the group that I knew he hung out with. And so it was shocking to me when they're like, he did it, like, and it was it hit the community pretty hard.
So that brings me to a point. So when your brother committed suicide, were there signs prior to him committing suicide, or?
It was probably about a year before my dad had found a note.
Okay.
He had just a feeling that something, may have been going on. And he was across the street at the neighbor's house and came over, and he found a note from my brother, and that was kind of a sign that, maybe something was going on. And obviously he didn't follow through, or even was able to, do an attempt at that time. But, the following year he did. And they, my parents had him in some pretty heavy counseling, and had him with, like a social worker, and trying to do different things. And his counselor was, pretty devastated after, Jared passed away, because he said that there were no signs, and, textbook with counselors go through, there just wasn't anything at all.
No indication of being unhappy.
Right, or that he would, possibly, do something like that. So.
Okay. And if you don't mind me asking, what did he do?
He hung himself.
He hung himself. So someone found him.
My mother did.
Your mother did. And how's your mother doing?
She, I think that has to be probably one of the most challenging, struggles in life. Obviously, when your children pass away before you do,
Sure.
That has to be, such a struggle. But then when your child takes their own life, and you have to find them, and there's nothing, you can do. I can't think of, especially as a mother now, anything more challenging that you could overcome. I think she's done, well, but, there's still, I think, a lot of hurt there.
And someone mentioned that had experience with someone attempting or committing suicide. I saw hands go up. Was there someone else? Yes.
When I was in 3rd grade, my uncle hung himself, and no one really saw that coming or knew why it happened. And then just this year, one of my friends, it wasn't her stepdad, but he was engaged to her mom, so he was going to be her stepdad. He committed suicide, and no one knows why. Still, they don't even know why. They don't know what happened or why he did it.
So how did that affect you as an individual, being exposed to those type of things?
When I was little, it didn't really affect me that much because I was really little and I didn't really understand what was going on. And I didn't even actually know the full story of what happened until like recently, just because my parents didn't want me to like be exposed to that because I was little. And then it didn't really affect me that much when my friend's dad died because I didn't really know him, but it affected me because of how sad, like how upset she was about it and stuff like that.
Okay. So in your profession for being a suicide prevention, do you primarily work with those individuals who are contemplating suicide and trying to stop them, or do you work with the families in the aftermath of situations of this nature?
With our organization, we actually have different things that we do. We are a statewide organization.
Okay.
So we work with individuals, from here all the way over to Boise, up north, in northern Idaho. But it's also a national organization. We're just kind of our own little state entity that's under that giant umbrella. There are, different chapters that we organize and help facilitate, and they deal with survivor, groups, and they also deal with education, and they deal with, we work with a lot of mental health providers and trying to educate and give them information on how to help with suicide prevention. We also did a brand new program this year under the state Department of Education, and that was called Idaho Lives.
Okay.
And that was a program where we go out and we actually educate, teachers, teenagers, parents on what are called the circle of influence, so that if, like one of these guys were to even think about suicide, if somebody in that circle of influence were to see different things going on, they know what exactly to do to help that person. So there's a lot of different things we're doing. I think we just got a grant from a nonprofit that will allow us to do the same type of things with, religious leaders as well. So.
Okay. And now, did you mention how many years ago did your brother commit suicide? Did you mention that already?
Was in 2002, so that was 12 years ago.
12 years ago. Okay. So as a mother of two children, what are some of the fears that you perhaps have concerning your children and growing up in this society?
I feel like they have so much pressure to navigate away from the negativity. I feel like, with my children and with, these guys, there's so much of the world that tries to pull them back. And, unfortunately with things like suicide and even, crime, it's the world pulling at our youth, telling them this is what you should do, or this is how you should live.
Through video games, through movies.
Through, everything that's out there. And I think that that's a challenge with our youth in trying to keep them positive and keep them directed, and to put, their faith and focus on higher things as opposed to what, surrounding them at all times. And that's the fear I have as a parent, is that there's only so much you can do when the world is trying to pull, your children back into dark places.
Absolutely. So opening this question up to the floor, are any one of you under peer pressure?
Oh, constantly.
Constantly?
Mainly to be unhappy, because a lot of times people hate your happiness, and it seems like when you step out to just to be happy, people will try their best to knock you down. And I've been told, like I've talked about that to other people, and they tell me, oh, that's just this generation. But personally, I don't think the people have changed, because I think if the older generations had what we had, they do the exact same thing with it. And character doesn't change, so somebody will be the person that they are. And I met older people that are just as crazy, just as negative, just as causing just as much trouble as young people. And then they look at young people and say, "Oh, you're doing this with the internet," and I said, "You were doing this without the internet, just in a different way."
Do y'all agree? Do y'all agree with that? What about any one of you? What is peer pressure like for you as a young person living in the 21st century?
Well, right now, just fitting in, because there's a lot of like groups that you have to be in, and if you're not this kind of group, then pretty much they treat you like a nobody. So.
As I can imagine, it's challenging trying to identify with groups and trying to fit in. Is fitting in important? Is that important?
Not as much anymore.
Yeah, not as
but
much
like
as anymore.
Growing up, yeah, it was very important.
Very important.
Sometimes it seems like there's more pressure to be different now, and to go away from the status quo, because they want you to try to fit into these groups, but then once you fit into these groups, you have to be different in these groups, and that causes a lot of strain on a mental and.
Would you like to elaborate on that?
I think what's interesting for you guys is, for me and my generation, it was, very, you have to be a part of this group. And so if you're part of this group, you have to conform, and this is what you're supposed to look like or talk like or, act like. And for you guys to have to, not only try to conform to be normal yet different, that most certainly is a challenge. And that wouldn't be easy at all, but that's kind of what our society, I see our society do. So if you're, this, then you're supposed to look, act, and be like this, but then our society's become so big on what's called personal branding, where you're supposed to go out and show who you are and why you're unique and why, people should pay attention to you. So it's definitely a challenge, and I don't see it getting easier. I think, even as adults, we still have to, conform to, our social circles and our groups. And, if we're doing something that our friends aren't doing, then it's like, well, why are you doing things this way? Or parents, why are you doing things this way? So I can tell you it doesn't end even when you become adults too.
Is color very important? Is important?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, that kind of stuff isn't really a big problem here.
Okay.
Like with the colors and things like that, not really a big problem here as it would be somewhere else, but that's only because it's here.
Well, I wanted to say that growing up in a single family home, I attempted suicide when I was 11.
Oh, wow.
When I was 11 years old, coming from a single family home and feeling as if my parents' divorce was my fault, and trying to, in my young mind, being that age, trying to figure out what can I do to get dad back home.
Right.
So thinking, well, if I harm myself, that would motivate him to come back home.
Right.
Not thinking at all. And so
Right.
I went in the bathroom and took a bottle of pills. My mother thought I went to school, and I hid in the closet until she left. And so, but I recovered from that. So in your line of work, do you run into children, if you will? Matter of fact, what's the youngest child have you came across, perhaps, that tried to commit suicide or attempted suicide?
With the cases that come to us, we don't, the cases that come to our different chapters or even our board, we don't get a lot of details on, the specifics unless somebody's actually followed through, and then we try to go and reach out to those families and support them. I see, you see and hear about young people all the time, unfortunately. As young as 11, I really haven't heard of anything, below that.
Okay.
I think the age groups that we start to focus on and we see, kind of those thought processes, are about, 9, 10 years old, because our kids are are now, when they're 9, 10 years old, are starting to think that they have to be older, you know, like teenagers, and that they have to conform to what, you know, these guys are doing. And then our teenagers feel like they have to be adults, you know, so it just continues on from there. And, you know, the youth certainly are the biggest group that you deal with when it comes to, you know, suicides and suicide attempts. You know, but what I've seen, you know, over the past few years, because I've had a focus and a passion for trying to do suicide prevention, you still have people in their 20s, you know, that are doing it. You have, you know, older people that are doing it. You see, you know, older, you know, couples that just don't, you know, want to have any reason to live anymore, and they do it. You know, definitely our veterans, you know, have been a huge group, you know, that because of PTSD and because of their combat related situations, yeah, that you see, and that's not talked about very much. The VA tends to hide all of that, but there's a lot of different groups that it impacts, but our youth, you know, that's always going to be the main demographic that it happens with, unfortunately.
Okay. So based upon other areas, of course, we are in Idaho Falls, Idaho. What is the suicide rate here in comparison to other areas?
In Idaho Falls specifically, I'm not sure, but as a state, we are, I want to say, we are we're in the top 10, if I remember right, from our last board retreat for youth suicide.
Top 10. Okay. Now, so out of your experience, have most of those suicide attempts were motivated by bullying? Because I know that is a hot topic.
It is. Hot topic
in society. You know, bullying in school. And have any one of you experienced bullying? You might have been a bully, I don't know, but have any one of you have experienced bullying? So, what was your experience with bullying in school?
Just like I was so different and so happy that people didn't like my personality, so they would just like push me around and call me names and stuff.
And how did elementary school? And how did you deal with that?
I kind of just kept to myself and know that I am different, that God made me the way I'm supposed to be, and if they have a problem with that, that's theirs.
Anybody else? Yes.
Like during one of my final years in high school, I think it was my junior year, I stood up for a little handicapped girl against this like big kid, and just about like every day, I was like a peer tutor in that class. Every day for like 2 weeks, it was just like me versus him, and every day he was just like picking on like every disabled kid in that class. And the teachers really, they didn't do anything. There were 3 teachers in there. It took another teacher to come in and like stop it. And he would call me like the N-word every day. He's like, so what's up, N? How you doing today, N? You know? And it was just like, because I was like the only one really standing up to him. The teachers didn't really do anything. And to be honest, like I felt more like bad after like the teacher stepped in, because like I felt I was stronger than one of the other handicapped girls that because he stopped messing with me, and he started messing with other kids that were like kind of weaker than me, that didn't stand up for themselves as much. Like, and so it was just like, it was kind of sad to watch that. And I tried to get like support from other people, but
and did
got
you get
nowhere.
That support?
Nowhere.
You didn't get the support?
Nowhere. So it's
you
just
say
like
other people,
I
are you talking about other teenagers or
yeah, like
adults?
other family that I thought had my back, you know, other like family, like siblings and cousins and stuff. I try to tell them, and they're just like, well, you shouldn't have said nothing. I was like, no, this is the right thing to do. Like, this isn't okay.
Anybody else? Who was bullying? Yes.
I used to be a bully because...
You used to be a bully?
Yeah, I used to be a bully. Like, pretty bad, because I used to have a very bad anger problem. And I used to pick on kids who I knew would pick on me, because I was scared of being picked on and being ridiculed and being belittled in front of people, especially because I was one of the only African American children where I was. It was mostly Hispanic. So and they would always mess with me. So I had to be strong, and I ended up making me into a bully because I just started messing with just about everybody, just in fear of me getting messed with.
So for those who are watching this talk show, what were some of the things that you looked for in others to bully?
Well, just about anything I could find. I would try different things like.
So in other words, how did you know to pick on this person or that person and that person? Was it something about them or something that you noticed?
I would shoot in the dark usually. Like I'd just be like, "Hey, you're going bald." Hey, and then
You're going bald.
You're going bald. And you talking about me? Right. You're talking about me. Right. You're talking about expansion. Right.
And some people would be affected by that. Like they'd be like, "No, I'm going bald," and be scared. But other people, like, I don't care. So I try something else. Like, "Oh, you have crappy shoes. You don't have any money." And then they'd be like, "Why did you have to even go there?" And then I'd be like, "Oh, that's it." And so I'd mess with them constantly on that subject. Or like, and where I was, there was Hispanics from different parts, and some of them were ranged in color. So some of them were really light, and some of them were pretty dark. And so I'd mess with the lighter ones because a lot of the dark ones didn't like the lighter ones just because of where they're originally from. So I'd be like, "Hey, you're one of those light ones," and just tried my best to make them feel so much like crap, so I wouldn't feel powerful and not feel bad about myself, because I'm light skinned myself. So it didn't make any sense, but I did my best to try to get some power over these people.
Anybody else have been bullied or were the person doing the bullying? And we do have other adults in the room, so feel free to say something. You're free to interject.
Well,
yes.
I have an experience, but ironically, when I was growing up, it was not referred to as bullying. You know, the girls wanted to meet you after school and beat you up at the bus stop. So I was the girl that got beat up every day after school. Oddly enough, we don't like how you look. Your hair is too long. Just stupid things. And you're looking in the media today, and I didn't actually think that I was bullied until bullying came to the forefront. And I thought, wow, that was me, years and years ago. And I've come to grips with it now, because at first you're like, well, you know, I'm this and I'm tough and I'm strong. You know, you all know my personality. But back then, because you're ashamed to say, okay, yeah, I did get bullied, but I did. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I'm sorry, you know, that it happened to me, but I am so against it because I know what that feels like for no apparent reason. And then because I was the quiet one back then, believe that or not, I was the quiet, shy, timid one. I think that provoked them even more. Well, we can get her because she's not going to say anything. You know, we can talk about her, we can push her, we can beat her up. And this went on for a very, very long time until I got threatened by my mother. She told me, if you come home one more time from being beat up, because my face would be scratched and scarred, and there was nobody to help me, I hated life. So sometimes we just have to stand up within ourselves. There has to be something that's more powerful than the fear of, you know, the girls are gonna beat me up, because I was not about to have my mom whoop me because I got beat up. So that was, that ended that story.
A lot of bullying would be stopped if somebody just spoke up, because that's why I would stop.
Yep.
Like, because I was so trying to be power, that somebody showed power back to me. I'm like, oh, let's not mess with them. Let's mess with somebody who's weaker, because they're gonna stand up to me. And
so, what was the turning point for you?
the turning point for me
to not bully anymore.
is realizing that me pointing out their insecurities was actually me pointing out my insecurities, and knowing that because I didn't have depression, but I was kind of like I didn't like myself very much, and
So that was a cover up.
yeah.
To try.
So I was like, I don't like you because I don't like me, kind of thing.
And would you agree with that?
I agree, and I think that you see that a lot. I mean, when you see bullies, you know, usually they're, and you know, even with mental health professionals, they could probably tell you the same thing. In that, you know, with bullies, there's usually some foundation of something else, you know, that's wrong, whether that be insecurities or problems at home, or you know, jealousy, or you know, just a myriad of problems, autism, you know, mental health disorders. Our daughter Kylie, and she attends a Christian based school and daycare. 2 or 3 years ago, just in summertime, was bullied by somebody that was almost twice her age.
Okay.
You know, this was when she was 5-6 years old, and it was because you know this particular girl was autistic, you know, but it was a part of her, you know, mental disability. And of course, you know, once the problem came to the forefront with the, you know, with the teachers and the administrators and everything, you know, they did what they could to help with Kylie and her friend, but you know, there was that underlying foundation, and that's what you see with a lot of it. And you know, sometimes even when they're so young, this girl is 9-10 years old, you know, they don't understand that it's bullying. And I think that has become an issue in our society too, is that there's this term called bullying, but what does that mean? And
What does it mean?
yeah, and what are, you know, us as parents doing to teach our young people, this is bullying, you should not do this. These are the reasons why, but you know, what are our schools doing, and what are our societies doing, instead of just throwing out and sensationalizing this term called bullying.
So do you think, you know, for those who are watching, do you think that parents are naive, or as far as the aspect of, especially, you know, working in the education field, I've seen a lot of parents come in and, you know, their child, for whatever reason, have gotten in trouble.
Right.
And they're the one defending, you know, not my child, not my daughter. She,
Right.
you know, she's that. Do you see a lot of that? Do you think parents is just not educated enough or knowledgeable enough of what our young people and our children are exposed to?
I think the answer to that would be yes. You know, the simple answer would be yes. But, you know, even when all of us as adults were, you know, growing up, we were, you know, masters at tricking our parents into
Right.
being this person in the household and being this person outside of the household. I don't think kids are any different,
Yeah, I didn't
you
do
know,
that,
today.
did y'all? Did y'all do that?
You guys were the same person in the house and outside of the house, yeah. So, you know, I think that that's a challenge because, you know, especially once they are out in the world as teenagers, especially, you know, there's so much that they can do, and there's so much, you know, impact that they can have on others, and they can, you know, go out and they can bully the, you know, the lighter skinned people, and then come home at night, be sitting at dinner and just having a nice conversation. So as a parent, you know, you or I would look, you know, at our child and say, when we get called into the principal's office, you have no idea what you're talking about. This is the perfect kid. Like, this, he does nothing wrong. So I don't think that will ever change. I think our teenagers are gonna outsmart us
Right.
all the time.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, a lot of the problem, like with in our society today, has to do with that, because a lot of parents are like that, or like will walk in, instead of making their child take responsibility and like punishing their child for it, they'll just be like, oh, that my child couldn't do that, that's not something my child would do, or they'll yell at the other person. Because I know that, like, even with education, a lot of times parents will call teachers and yell at teachers for not educating their child right, just because their child's lazy and won't do their schoolwork and stuff
Right.
like that. And parents tend to do that a lot more today.
Well, and I think a lot of what I saw even with my generation is you see parents that are disconnected, you know, from their kids, or they want to be friends with their kids, like, instead of being parents. I mean, my parents are old school. I mean, if I did something wrong, I had the fear of God in my heart with my dad. Like, I was so afraid of what my dad would do. And, that, you know, that wasn't the same with some of my friends growing up. You know, they could go out and stay out until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, 15, 16 years old, or they could go party or drink or do all these things. You know, I had to be home at 10 o'clock at night. You know, I had to have a job. And when I did get caught at a party and my dad had to come and pick me up at the police station because I'd been at a party, that was like one of the scariest moments of my life. It was like, oh my gosh, you know. And I hadn't gotten in trouble, but I'd just been at the party, so they gathered everybody up and take everybody in. They call your parents, and I was so afraid. And he said, you know, I am so glad that you know, didn't drink or you weren't doing anything, but at the same time, you can't put yourself into those situations. Parents today won't say those type of things, and they wouldn't back then. So that, you know, that makes it challenging for bullying and trying to teach our kids the right things. We're pretty old school with our kids, I mean, and so hopefully they'll be old school with their kids too, but not sure with that one right there.
And you had good parents. I had to be home before the street lights came on.
That was mine. I didn't have like a curfew. Just like when it got dark, I had to be outside.
Catch you if you want to. It's gonna be on. You know, so that's true. So parents just need to be more educated and be more aware, and not become naive, because we live in a fast-paced society,
Right.
and anything can happen. And
Right.
so,
Well, and it's good to be engaged and know what your kids are doing. And
Uh-huh.
you know what? I mean, our kids are just like us. We're not perfect.
Right.
They're going to make mistakes. You know, there's going to be consequences. And, you know, we have to be the ones that really reiterate, you know, choices equal consequences, and not stand by them, because that only makes them think that it's okay and you can get away with things if you know the right people, or you say the right things, or you manipulate. So,
and we have other adults in the room. Are there any adults who would like to give our young people any advice concerning what we've talked about so far? Anybody?
I was just thinking about my childhood, and my father passed away when I was 10 years old. He died of cancer. So I was at a younger age where I was still being nurtured, but I had 8 other brothers. So the older brothers kind of looked out for us. So I have a son that grew up in this community. Just when we were sitting down eating at the table, well, didn't they teach you in school today to share? You know, that wasn't it. I think my grandmother had a wrong impression of what education was like. Education was to teach you to have good skills and knowledge to go out and do things, but the way you treat people, that should be taught at home. Okay, so our parents, yeah, the kids are a little bit smarter than the parents. I didn't realize my kid had went to a party, got drunk, drove home, got caught with a DUI, license was restricted, but I was divorced at the time, so he said, Mom, just don't tell Dad. My wife can say she's proud of her kids, the accomplishment that she made. She has a daughter now that's studying to be a doctor. You ask her, she probably never would have thought her daughter would want to be a doctor. But you know, that's got to be encouraging. So again, everything that we try to give to you is to help you be better. And that's our responsibility as adults to do.
And that brings up one of the valid points, even far as the aspect of, because I remember some of the young people had mentioned that they didn't have a good support system. And so in society, do you see a lot of mentors today?
I think that they are out there. They are, you know, they're fewer, but I think if you find, you know, mentors and reach out to them, and there certainly are some people that are encouraging. Sometimes, you know, your best mentors are the ones that don't think that they're mentors, or don't, you know, set out to be mentors. But, you know, there are a lot of adults out there that would love and care for, you know, kids. If, you know, I mean, I would never think of myself as a mentor, but if I had, you know, a child that came up to me and said, you know, I'm having these issues or these thoughts, or, you know, I want to do this with my life, you know, I would do everything in my power to try to help that child succeed. even if they didn't have a positive support system, at home.
And that was the one piece of advice that I was going to give. And looking at the young people that are here, I know that you are comfortable with your parents. So don't be afraid to go with your parents or go to them and talk to them about things that's going on. However, if you're not comfortable going to a parent, find somebody that you trust, somebody that you can talk to and that you know that they're going to hold your confidence. Because you don't want to hold everything inside. You've got to release it, because it's the small things that continue to build up where you feel like, okay, I'm going to explode. I can't handle it anymore.
I think when it comes to mentors, a lot of young people see the people who are mentoring them as jerks that tell them what to do, and they refuse to listen to them. Like, I don't want to listen to you. But if they had stopped a second and said, oh, they might be telling me something good, then they would have instantly had some guidance in their life. Because I didn't get a mentor in my life that I knew was a mentor until about 3-4 years ago, and he brought me through. He wasn't even much older than me. He was 2-3 years older than me. He taught me how to do most of the things I know how to do. Like, I'm a rapper. He taught me how to rap. He taught me how to treat people. He taught me how to build people up instead of bringing people down. But at the time when I first met him, I didn't want to listen to a thing he said, because he would always tell me, he's a Christian, and he would always tell me, hey, read your Bible, man. I don't want to read my Bible. Hey, pray. I don't want to pray. Like, do this. I don't want to do this. Come to youth group with me. I don't want to go to youth group. They're a bunch of craziness. You're going to learn something. And then and it took me a lot of growing in maturity, and a lot of growing and a change in my mindset to realize this person is trying to build me up. And then I realized that we have so many people that can mentor us, because I have mentors that I've never met before. I listen to podcasts and I'm like, wow, this person is kind of a mentor to me, because I listen to their podcasts all the time and they show me how to live my life. And we just need to be able to identify who the people are who are actually mentoring us.
So, of course, back in the 1960s was a turbulent time in history with the assassination, of course, of JFK, Martin Luther King, and JFK's brother,
Robert King.
Who was that?
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X. And so, of course, and these individuals have, of course, made our history books as leaders in the forefront. And so, young people, so do you see those individuals today, as far as within the political world, do you see those individuals, perhaps on TV or television, who emulate, if you will, those key leaders back in the 60s? Yes.
I would say no, because a lot of politics today is about lying to get people to vote for you instead of saying I'm going to be the best president because I'm going to help our country. It's saying I want to be the president, so I'm going to lie to you and tell you everything that you want to hear and not do any of that at all. When I go that's how politics is with them. That's how a lot of politics is today. Instead of actually trying to be a leader, it's about money and personal gain.
So the question is, why don't we see that today?
I think
What
it's
is going
watered
on?
down, so because of all of those men that you named, they have disciples that follow after them, and it just keeps spreading out. I just think it's watered down. I think education has allowed us to do that, the advancement, so you won't have so many specific icons in these areas. So I just think it's watered down a little bit.
What do you think, Ms. Monica, or what do you see?
I think that, back then, because society was a little bit more slow paced and, there were such huge changes going on with those times, people like, JFK and, Martin Luther King and, Malcolm X and, those key figures that we saw back then, they really shaped society, where, today's society is so different, and that it is actually watered down. We focus on, what celebrities are doing and, what, this person's doing. And, it's just a totally different society where there are people out there trying to do different things and make an impact, but it's very, different. And so those icons of the past, even, like Maya Angelou, who just passed it, that's something, that's a generation that's gone past. Those are icons that are gone past, and we won't ever see anything like that. It will be diluted saying, like Obama, is an icon because he was our first African American president. Well, how did he get there? Well, he persuaded people to vote based on, smart marketing people and campaign managers and all these other people, not based on, principles and ideas and, things that he believed in that he put forth. I just have like this amazing PR team, and I think that that's where there's a difference. These people, like Martin Luther King, were genuine, and they had beliefs and passion and things that they wanted to accomplish in life, and they were willing to sacrifice their whole life, to make a change. And now it's just, you don't see that. You just have great PR people that help make changes.
And are we suffering because of that? Mm-hmm. Are we suffering because we don't have those leaders?
I think that we are.
Or is it not necessary?
No, I think that our society needs positive, encouraging leaders that make change. And I think that we do suffer because we're following, as a society, not just, adults, but children too, they're following false hope. They're following people, when they look at, Hillary Clinton, or they look at, Obama, they're following this idea that, they do all the right things in life, that they too can succeed. But that's not the case. There's so much that goes behind it, money, politics, lies, so our children are following these people based on false hope.
Do you think we have a female president?
I don't know. It depends on how Hillary does in 2016.
I think with our society, it has gotten better. But it's just gotten to the point now, we're still looking upward, okay? And the reason why I say we have better, the schools have been integrated. There have been programs that have been implemented by the government, EO and affirmative action. There's been grants and stuff allow you to go to school. It has changed a lot. And those were some of the platforms that Malcolm X and Dr. King and the Kennedys, what they was trying to change is to build racial equality. We still have a long way to go, but we've come a long way.
When I think of leaders like Martin Luther King and people who want to grow the people around them, I think a big reason why we don't see that as much, we don't see that as much, people that are stepping out like that as much, is because what we're pursuing is wrong now. Like Martin Luther King pursued something righteous. He died for something righteous. Not for himself, but for a whole bunch of people. But what we're pursuing is self-glorification. I want to be president because I want to be president. I want the money, I want the fame, I want the recognition. And we, the celebrities, everybody wants to be a movie star. Everybody wants to be a rapper. First time I want to be a rapper is because I watched 50 Cent have all this stuff. And I was like, man, that's what I want to be. That's what I want to be. He's with all these girls. He gets all this money. It's like, why? And then we complain about change after that. How are you going to complain about change when you're not making it? But if we would change our views and stop looking in the mirror and saying, I'm gonna make you better, and then start putting the mirror to the world and saying, I'm gonna make this better.
What is that one thing you would like to change or see change, and why? What is that thing that you would like as far as society, as far as the way our world is going?
Well, I have 2 things.
Okay.
Like stereotypes and discrimination. Like those are 2 things like I really don't like. They're just really pointless and stupid to me.
So you would change. What would you change?
Like, I try not to.
Or like to see change, right?
Yeah. I try to, within myself, I try to like catch myself, cause like sometimes it's like you don't realize you live in like a society. Like I personally don't have like a lot of the stereotypical like beliefs that we see.
Mainly a change in respect. There seems like there's no respect for other people and other things. So
And why do you think there's no respect for other people?
because we're so focused on ourselves. So basically humility and respect, which goes hand in hand to a certain extent. Because without humility, you're not going to show respect to anybody. And without respect, you have no humility. So if we just grow in humility and respect, everything else will start to change because our focus is no longer on ourselves.
So we become a selfish society.
Yeah.
We become a selfish society. So Ms. Monica, I have a question for you, and definitely, again, we appreciate you being here with us among our young people and our adults. If the younger you, 5, 8, 10, was in your presence right now, and you were looking at yourself as the younger you, what would be the advice that you would give to that younger you based upon what you know now?
I think because of everything that I've gone through, and I've been through so many trials and tribulations, and through a lot of those trials and tribulations, I didn't have a strong faith in God. I think my advice, to the younger people would be, to cling on their faith, and to cling on hope and to cling on, positive things, because life isn't easy at all, and there's always going to be, trials and tribulations. I feel that if I had a stronger faith, back then, and really had, the tools and resources provided to me, not to say, I believed in God, and I believed in Jesus, and I went to church, up to probably my 7th grade year when we had a new pastor that came in. And, just going to church doesn't constitute as having faith or having the right resources there. I really think diving into your faith and making that a part of your life is important to our young people. And, our daughter, Kylie, I see her, and she's such an inspiration. I wish I could have been like her when I was her age. I mean, she's a warrior for God, and she's, Jesus' little disciple. And she teaches us even sometimes. I mean, I'm so bad when I'm driving. And I'll yell at people, and I'm like, what are you doing? And there may even be a cuss word or two. I don't even know. There was one day I remember we were in the car, on one of our busy streets here in town. And my husband and I are just like...
Was it 17th Street?
Yes, it was. And I'm yelling at my husband and I are just yelling at this car that had cut us off when we were so angry. And, you hear this little voice from the background. And she goes, you guys, they're Jesus's people too. And we're just like, okay, we just
You started crying.
we didn't cry, but we're just like, okay, shut it down. So I think, and that's such a positive thing to see in such a young person. And, that's, if I could go back in time, I wish that I could have had that in my life, because I feel like my life could be so different. But, I feel like God has put all of these things in my life and all these trials and tribulations to bring me to the place of my life so that, I can impact other people, and I can, just look at our own family and say we have to encourage these things or do these things or teach these things, because we didn't go through that as children. So.
And so you brought up a valid point. Children are like sponges.
They are.
And so parents, perhaps who in this room or who's watching this talk show, need to understand that children are listening, and so.
And watching.
Right, and they're listening and they're watching. So we have a responsibility to make sure that we become the mentors in their life, and to show them how to respond or treat others in time of distress,
right,
or whatever the case may be. That parents have a major responsibility.
They do.
To watch their own personal behavior and in the eyes and the lives of their children.
Right. Well, I mean, you just think back of when, you know, we were kids. You sit
Right.
down and you don't, you know, our parents didn't think that we were always watching or absorbing these things. And,
Absolutely.
you know, I've gone to my parents and I was like, when I was, you know, 8 or 9, I remember when you did this, and they're like, you remember that? You were watching, you know, but you remember it, and then as an adult you put together, you know, the pieces. So these guys think and know and understand a lot more, you know, than we think that they do. So you really have to, you know, try to be the light at all times, and not just for them, but for their friends and for the other people that are around in their circles, because you make an impact in their lives as well.
Right. And also with teenagers, as teenagers, we have a responsibility to make sure that we're doing the same thing in the presence of children that's younger than you are, to know that children are watching. And so we want to make sure that the generation of encouragement, because I strongly believe that we have to become the change we want to see. We have to become the change we want to see. You know, it's okay to say, I want to see this happen, see this change, but it really begins with me.
Right.
You know, so I really start that. You know, that it's almost like a domino effect. I really start that. So somebody talked about a lack of respect in others, and so it begins with me and how I respect others, because there are other people that's watching.
I'll respond to that.
Yes.
Every generation needs to be an example. I think about, I have guys that I consider my closest friends are 6, 7 years older than me. I aspire to get to that age one day. And so when I talk to them about things, it helps me, 6, 7 years younger, to be thinking like a person that's 6, 7 years older. Those are some of the things that I want my resume to reflect now. So keep that in mind. As you get older, make sure you keep paving the way. And it will make changes in, you know, this sex slave thing. It'll make changes in, my biggest gripe was corporate America. When you see the corporate sit down, I don't see anybody that has skin color like me. How can you represent me? Okay, but again, you need to do those things to aspire to put yourself in that position. For an example, for me to work for the INL, it requires you have to have a security clearance. You can't have a security clearance if you got a record. Okay, so you got to keep your nose clean. And it wasn't that I didn't have the opportunities, and you're going to have the opportunities. You just need to make the decision. Hey, this can follow me for the rest of my life. So remember, the choices you make now does make a difference on how far you can aspire later on.
To kind of add onto that and to kind of bash older people a little bit. When I was younger, what made me like, I lost a lot of respect for my parents when I was little, because they would tell me things but not act on them. Mm-hmm. Like they used my mom sometimes. She this is a true story. We were in the car and she was telling me, you have to respect people at all times. I don't want you cussing or anything. We got pulled over by a cop. Cop came up. I don't know why you bleed. I was sitting there like, are you like what? because just because you say something doesn't mean that you're doing it.
Right.
Like I could say I'm Christian, but that doesn't mean I'm doing it.
Yeah, exactly.
I could say I'm a rapper, but if I never rap, I'm not rapping.
Yeah.
So because I see older people all the time. Don't do this, even though I'm doing it right now.
One thing that I would always encourage parents to teach their children, and even like for us to think about as Christians, is to not hate other people because the sins they're committing. Because I know that's a big problem now with a lot of the controversy that's going around, is a lot of Christians will condemn people and hate people because of the sins they're committing instead of showing them the love of Christ. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I always say, that like if I talk to my mom, I've told her about this, and I'll be like, because we'll go to hell just as quick as they will, because the sins they're committing for hating them because of it. And so I'd always just stress that, and that was what I was thinking when you asked us about the change, because that's the change that I want to see. Is I want to see Christians stop hating people because of sin, because we need to love them.
Yes.
Something that I would say to the parents, if your child is like going through something and they need to go somewhere, make it feel comfortable. If they really want to go to you, I mean, as us, I really want to go to my parents, but it's hard to go to your parents when you know exactly what they're gonna say. It's like your opinion doesn't even matter. Like, you know what I mean? And I think that would definitely make a difference if the parents would be more like, I was in their shoes. You know what I mean? Like, we want to hear that kind of stuff, you know? Not like, well, you're bad because you did this and this and this and this and this.
Right.
You need to act right and stuff like this. Yeah, we know that, obviously.
Right.
And like the whole assuming thing, just to go based on more of what she says, you know, it's just like but you're not even listening to the story. You're just like assuming that this is how it happened. Like, you don't even know, you know? Like, I've had like so many people like put me down like all my life. Like, ever since I was like 5, my life fell apart. I've seen like that Disney is not like how life is. I've lost so many people due to like murder and so many things. I lost my dad when I was 6, and I still remember being a 6-year-old girl coming home from like school or daycare, and my mom's like, oh, your dad's gonna be on TV. And to know that my dad was like a deacon in Bishop Foster's, the late Bishop Foster's church, and you know, for people who knew him, knew he was a sweet man who had a bit of a drinking problem, and it got kind of the best of him, and he ended up taking the life of someone I love.
It is hard, you know, and I went through similar situations, you know, especially with my brother, and going through what I went through, because I felt like nobody understood. And I felt like, you know, I tried to reach out to people, but then they wouldn't understand, you know, and it's hard when you feel like the world doesn't understand you.
Yes.
And it's hard to feel like it's you against the world. And it's hard to feel like you have the weight on your shoulders. But I think, you know, when you find people that can be your mentors or that are your support system, you know, one person that drastically, you know, changed my life was my husband. And I met him after my brother had died. You know, so he didn't know my brother. He wasn't a part of, you know, the whole situation. But he found me afterwards, and he was, you know, encouraging. And he was the reason that I started to heal. And it took a long time, you know, but there's people in your lives that you feel should always be there and should always support you because they're family or because they've known you your whole lives. And I found out through this process that that's not true. You know, I had a conversation with one of my family members, you know, in the past couple of months, and we were going over some of the situations that had happened, you know, a few years back where I was acting out, but it was because I hadn't said, you know, I hadn't gotten a lot of my feelings out or really dealt with the situation that I went through. And so I was acting out in different ways, like subconsciously. And there was, you know, a situation where we actually got into a family fight, and I was, you know, in her face, you know, and pushing her because I was so angry, you know, and there were so many feelings built up. And I expressed to her, I said, you know what? I said, I know that this doesn't probably make you feel good other than I'm sorry, but I am so thankful I went through that situation because that was a catalyst for change for me. And I said, you know, it only got better and more positive from that point. And she said, well, we knew, you know, and this is coming from somebody that has supposed to have loved and cared for me my entire life. It wasn't, you know, my parents, but it was a close family member. She said, we knew that you had hit rock bottom at that point in time. And do you know what they did? They didn't do, when they knew that I was at my lowest, they didn't stand by me. They didn't support me. They didn't come around me and say, how can I help you? They let me go on that journey on my own, you know? And so that is hard, you know, in those situations where you sit down and say, well, why didn't you love and care for me? But out of that, you know, I've built stronger relationships, you know, with other people, with friends, you know, who are so much like my family now. you know, and others that surround me and support me and love me. And so those people are out there, but the hard part is you have to be open and reach out, because part of me was very much like you. I was very, very close. And even to get into the relationship with my husband, that was very tough for me, because my thought process is I've lost somebody I love and care for so much. I don't ever want to go through the pain of losing somebody else again that I love and care for. And, you know, like I said, he was the catalyst, but even after him, it was like, okay, there's James, and he's the only person I love and care for, and if I lose him, I'm gonna fall off the cliff, you know. But slowly but surely I started opening up, and I have relationships now that I love and cherish for the rest of my life. But I had to be the one that opened up and said, I've got these issues, I've got to deal with this, you know, this isn't easy, and, you know, here's a group of people that will love and support and stand by me, you know, no matter what. So I'd really, you know, it sounds like you're on that path, and I'd really encourage you to continue on that path, because you will be in such a better place, you know, when you get to the end of that, you know, that trial. And I promise you that.
Yeah, I've noticed
Well,
that.
I just wanted to say we are coming to a close, and so once again, the purpose for this interview and for interacting with our young people, so the world can see and know what our young people are thinking, what what's going across their minds, and how, as an adults or mentors or parents, what we can do to better cater to this generation, because eventually we are leaving the scene, and so we want the world to continue in the right place, and it begins right now. And so, Miss Monica, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Can we give her a hand? And hopefully there's something from this from Dee's Place Talk Show was a help to you. You may be in Europe, you may be in Mississippi, you may be in South Carolina, or you may be right here in Idaho. We just want all the young people to know that we love you and we care for you, and you are not alone, as you can see. And to the parents, be encouraged and be more involved in the lives of young people, and I believe we will go in the right direction. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you again.